Hi, I'm Gray, and welcome to my PechaKucha presentation on Thomas More's Utopia. The book, written in 1516, explores a not-so-far-away land through dialogue between a citizen of England and one of Utopia. More's intent was to highlight England's social problems through comparison with what he believed to be an ideal world. In this presentation, I will be exploring More's most revolutionary concepts and comparing them to our modern world to see if we have achieved utopia yet. A quick note, since I'm American, I will mostly be going off of American society and political structures with references to the modern Great Britain when relevant. One of More's biggest issues with British society is the prevalence of oligopoly. According to him, quote, wealth stays in the hands of the same few who are not obliged to sell before they wish, and they do not wish to sell until they get the price they ask. In the modern era, this manifests as conglomerates, which provide the illusion of choice in the free market and price gouging to maximize profit for a select few at the top. Another one of More's more revolutionary concepts is how he organizes Utopia's prison system, which has prisoners, quote, employed in public works, unbound and unguarded. States that, quote, the object of this punishment is to destroy the vice and save the person. This is a stark contrast to America's privatized prison system, which has become an industry unto itself. However, there is one key way in which the utopian and modern systems are not so different, and that is their reliance on exploitative labor. Quote, when someone needs a hired hand, you can go to the marketplace and hire a convict for a day at a fixed wage that is less than what he would have had to pay a free man. This is similar to how America abolished slavery, except as a punishment for crime. Moore also predicted a lot of the practices that would come in the era of colonization, which England would not entirely begin until the following century. When utopians are in need of more space and resources, they, quote, select citizens from each city to go to the mainland nearest them and found a colony wherever the inhabitants have unoccupied and unused land. According to the captain, quote, they live under their own laws, letting the natives who wish to do so join them. However, quote, if the natives refuse to live according to utopian laws, the settlers drive them out of the territory. This is a fantastic example of colonizer rhetoric and the denial of harm in colonization. The land is not unoccupied if there are people there, and it is only considered unused if it is not used as the utopians would. Speaking of how utopians use land, Moore has a lot of opinions on how land should be used. He condemns, quote, deer parks and game preserves, places where the rich went to kill animals, often ones they put there specifically to hunt and kill. While most of America's hunting grounds today are protected wilderness, I would like to argue that the modern equivalent of deer parks is golf courses. Golf courses take up a disproportionate amount of land and resources compared to the number of people who enjoy them. Those people also tend to be the societal and economic elite, marking golf courses as an example of social stratification. Moore also takes offense to the use of land for sheep farming. He believed that not only did sheep produce less than agriculture on the same land, they also offered fewer employment opportunities because there were fewer shepherds needed than field laborers. Additionally, at the time, wool was being priced out of the affordability of those responsible for producing it. Today, the United Kingdom is still one of the world's highest wool exporters, and wool garments are still relatively expensive compared to other materials, even other natural fibers. The primary transition in this market has been a rise in the use of synthetic materials. The poor still can't afford wool, and now we have microplastics in our brains. A lot of the commentary on how land is used stems from how the utopians view land itself. Moore says that, quote, citizens consider themselves to be cultivators, not owners of what they hold. Note that this is a common belief held by indigenous populations that would suffer from the aforementioned colonization. Moore even goes so far as to condemn private property outright, saying that, quote, while it lasts for most of mankind, there will remain a heavy and intolerable burden of poverty and anxiety. I felt that, but you want to know what that sounds like? Communism. Now, Moore's society was pre-capitalist. That idea wouldn't appear until the next century, but it already had markers of capitalism. Communism took another 150 years to be theorized, but Marx and Moore might get along all right when it comes to economics. The main thing that separates utopia from true communism is that they function on a very strange economy. We can see from the previous comment about wages that there is some form of currency, but it is rarely used. Most of the society functions on a sort of barter economy, but rather than direct trades, resources are pooled, and everyone can take what they need. This completely eliminates the primary tenet of capitalism, the law of supply and demand, because when there is more supply than demand, no currency is necessary. Moore mentions that Utopia does trade its excess resources, but says nothing that would lead the reader to believe Utopia relies on imports. One final point of discussion I would like to mention is the way that Utopia genders its labor. Moore says that, quote, agriculture is one common to all, both men and women. He then lists a series of crafts, finishing that, quote, everyone, man and woman alike, learns one of these crafts. However, Moore then continues that, quote, women, the weaker sex, take on the lighter task, generally working with wool and linen, while the men do the heavy labor. This division is not uncommon, but did he have to be misogynistic about it? He also says that, quote, as a rule, a son is brought up in his father's craft, but makes no mention of how women's work is decided. The subtle degradation and omission of women's work highlight that even in a society where everyone is expected to work, domestic crafts and women's work are still considered less important. Now that we have a pretty good idea of how Utopia works, the question remains, are we there yet? Have we even made progress in the past 500 years? And honestly, I'm leaning towards no. There are several inherent flaws and contradictions in Moore's system that I don't think it could ever work, and I don't think it should. A major part of Utopia is its self-sufficiency, which requires a truly globalized society. Additionally, Moore says that utopians are, quote, identical in language, manners, customs, and laws. Based on their colonization practices, we can safely assume that Utopia requires total assimilation and will exterminate all who do not fit their mold. And we all know how that goes. Or maybe we don't, since we're watching it for the second time in less than a century. But either way, I don't want that kind of utopia. So I don't want Moore's utopia at all. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope this gave you something to think about, and I'll see you next time.